Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of 365 Days of Gaming. I appreciate you taking out time to check out the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Greatly appreciate it. But let's get right into it. So we've been talking about fighting games, and a lot of the fighting games I enjoyed don't necessarily have a high learning curve. But there are some that do. So let's talk about one of those games. That is Bushido Blade for the PlayStation. Now, if you've never heard of Bushido Blade, let me give you a brief synopsis of it. This is not your traditional fighter. As the name implies, it deals with more of the samurai code, and the fighting system is definitely a representation of that. This game has no life bars. There's no special meter. There are no rounds. It is literally one-on-one. The first person to land a finishing blow wins. Now, there are two games in the series, Bushido Blade 1 and 2. We're going to be looking at the first game, and I just want to show you how simple the game is, but also how hard the game can be. Because there's no life bars, right? How does damage work? Well, damage is based on where you get hit. So you can get hit in certain limbs, and you won't necessarily lose, but you will lose the function of that limb, making it very hard to attack, right? And as you play against different characters and you have different weapons, your abilities change, the way you can attack, the angles that you can attack, the type of damage that you can do changes. So if you use a katana, for example, and you're going against somebody with a spear, your approach has to be different based on not only the weapon that you're using, but the weapon that they're using. If somebody's playing with the hammer, for example, they do a lot of limb damage, but not necessarily do killing blows. But if you can't use your limbs correctly, you can't attack correctly. So you end up being at a disadvantage either way. And that's what this game is like, really, really cool, because on its surface, it's not really that hard to pick up and play. There's a few attack buttons and a change of stance. And as you kind of learn characters and how they fight with different weapons, you start to see that there's a lot of depth to this game. And it can be really tricky, but that's what makes it fun. It's like, it's still a pick up and play type of game, but the learning curve is definitely much steeper than your traditional, your average fighter. I won't say traditional fight, but your average fighting game, right? And as you can see from the footage, different characters have to be approached in different ways, and sometimes you can get lucky, but not always. Right? Luck and skill both play a factor in this type of game, because again, somebody can strike multiple blows on someone and do damage, but not land a killing blow, and this other person can throw out this desperation attack, and you get sloppy, and all of a sudden you got cut down. And that's why I like this game, because it was just so different when you first played it. Like, to see a game, first of all, no HUD, right? And this is, mid 90s, late 90s. Like, what game doesn't have a HUD? Nowadays you have no HUD modes and things like that. But back then it was just like, no, this is a fighting game. I need to see how much health I have, what's the time limit. And this game is just, it basically plays by its own rules. And I really like that about this. I wish that they could try to do something else. I'm certain that there's probably been versions or games inspired by Bushido Blade, but I'm always a fan of the original series, getting its just due when it comes to remakes. Very, very wary of spiritual successors, because I always feel like is it a place to get hype for the game, or is it, just actually you're just trying to pay homage to the greats of before. But speaking of the weapons, right? So there's so many different weapons. There's not like a crazy amount, right? But there's about a dozen different weapons that you can play with. And then there are certain weapons that you see that you're like, hey man, what are you talking about? Like, there's one part of the game where you go against someone who has a gun, and I mean, they're just shooting at you. And I kind of got lucky with it. Normally this fight takes me way more time to finish, because I usually get killed the first few times. I have to keep restarting. But I got a little lucky. I got them confused, and it's like you could come across somebody in Bushido Blade just mashing buttons and getting wins. But eventually, once you figure out that they don't know what they're doing, you can kind of lead them to where you want them to go as far as in the combat, and you can kind of pull that win out fairly easy if you know what you're doing. I'm sure that some of you have heard of this game, but I'm sure that plenty of you have not. If you have a way to access this game, I definitely invite you to do so. I don't think that you will regret it. It isn't the most flashy looking game. It's not the most, incredibly designed game. Remember, this is from like 97, but it is a memorable trip down memory lane, and I really like the idea of what Bushido Blade represents. And I think more games should really try to represent combat in a very, I won't say realistic fashion, but more of a one swipe can end the battle type of phase. I thought that's what For Honor was going to be. Clearly it is not. But when I first saw For Honor, that's all I could think of was Bushido Blade. And not to say that For Honor is a terrible game or anything like that, but it brought back that emotion for that moment. And I was like, oh, are we getting something like that? We didn't, but you know, the feeling was still there. And that's what's really important. That's why I want to do this series, to kind of show you these games that evoke certain emotions. So if you know about Bushido Blade, let me know what weapon, character, what some memorable battles you remember. You know, the game can get a little irritating because you can lose at a moment's notice. So I definitely want to hear any of those stories like that. But, you know, hopefully if you never heard of this, I kind of opened your eye to the possibility of games from yesteryear and what we may see something in the future. If you ever hear about a remake to Bushido Blade, you know, think of your boy. You know, I brought that up. I put that out into the universe, me and whoever else. There are probably dozens of us. But I appreciate you checking out the video. Have fun. Be safe. Peace.